Good morning. This is Brendan again. We're about to re-engage with some work on the Corrado. Today's project is to replace the receiver dryer for the AC, which I have unsuccessfully installed twice and managed to strip the threads each time I've done it. So today I'm going to take my time, use a little bit of oil, make sure that it threads in very nicely, and hopefully by the end of the day we will have working AC. So here we go. So just a reminder, yes, I'm doing all this work outside. There are plenty of channels of people working on cars in their nice heated garages with 4-point lifts and all that fun stuff. I don't have all of that, and most of my work, honestly, I've always done in the driveway, whether I've lived in an apartment complex or condo or wherever the heck. Usually my garage has cars stored in it, so I don't have room to work in there. And so anyway, doing this work outside. As you can see, I've already pulled off the radiator support. What I did is I loosened all the bolts, put a towel over here so I don't mess anything up, and I just gently moved it over to the side so that I don't bend or mess up the pull cable for the hood. That's a really important thing. If you twist this around too much, you can actually bend the cable, and then you're going to have problems trying to open your hood, which is already problematic with a Corrado for those of you who've been in there. Anyway, here is the offending character today. This is the receiver dryer for the air conditioner, and I have in the past messed it up by cross threading these little threads where it's a brass fitting going to an aluminum receiver dryer. And I've just either been in a hurry or not paid attention. I've messed it up, and so it leaks from right there. So I'm going to be putting in a new receiver dryer. I'm going to put some oil on the threads, make sure they're nice and clean, and then I will take my time putting it in. And then we'll pressure test it, or I should say vacuum test it, make sure it's holding a vacuum before we charge it up. I might take some time to clean some of the stuff around in here. And anyway, here we go. So I sprayed a little bit of penetrating oil onto all the threads of everything that we need to take off here. Now the first thing we're going to do is loosen this retaining bolt up here at the top, and that'll free it a little bit, give it a little bit of motion. I'm not going to remove it all the way. I want this to be wiggly so that I can move it around. Actually, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take it off all the way, and that way I have enough room to get these off here. But there's a post that's sticking up. There's supposed to be two posts. One of them broke off. The new one will have a second post. And then down here, I'm going to be loosening both of these fittings underneath. So that fitting there, and that fitting there. Those need to come off in order to remove this. This one's going to be a 19 millimeter. Yep, 19. I don't remember if this is the side that I cross-threaded. I think it was probably the other side. This one's feeling like it's smoothly threaded in here, although kind of tight. So I know I had messed up the first one I installed, and when I installed this one I was in a little bit of a hurry, but I thought that I had gotten it right, so I probably snugged it down a little too much, trying to make sure that it was going to seal properly. Alright, so that one's loose. And then this remaining guy here I think is a 15 millimeter. I'm going to check a 16 first, just to test it. Let's see what we got here. Oh, it actually 17. Alright. 17 millimeter is the winner. So, oil resistance there. Some of you may have noticed, yeah, there's an oil cooler here. As many of us know, the VR6 runs pretty warm, especially in Southern California. Normal oil temperatures for daily driving can be anywhere 230 degrees, 240, even higher. And if you're under load doing some spirited driving, especially at altitude, you can see normal oil temperatures of up to 300 degrees. Now that's well within the parameters of what the oil can handle, but it is really hot, and you do stand the chance of overloading your coolant system and boiling over. So I added a 13-row Mocal oil cooler to the system. It did work really, really well. So when I drove across country a couple of years ago in the middle of the summertime, 120 degree outdoor temperatures in the Alamogordo desert, the oil temperature in here was staying at a nice 204 degrees, so was just where you want it to be. Not too hot, not too cold, good range. Highly recommend it. And I just used the sandwich plate adapter. I did leave the water to oil interchange, which is from the factory, in place. Some places recommend removing that and going just with the oil cooler itself and reroute the coolant so that it's not interacting. Two reasons for that. One, the stock oil cooler can develop internal leaks and you can start to mix your coolant with your oil, which is not good. The other thing is if you are using a hot coolant to cool your oil, it's going to be limited in its capacity to do that. So I elected to leave it in place for now because I had a brand new oil to water interchanger. Just figured I'd just stick it in there and see how it would go. Alright, now I'm at the point of the process where both of these threads are loose. In order to release them from the receiver dryer, they are under tension because of where they sit. Now one of them is attached back internally behind the condenser and the radiator, kind of wedged in there, and I can't really get to it very easily. The other one though follows along here, and you can see it's just clipped in place in a number of places, and it does connect here to a flexible pipe. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that as well. I'll have to replace the O-rings in this section here, but that's fine. I've got some spare O-rings, but that will give me some looseness to be able to get that over here off of it, hopefully be able to thread it in well without cross threading it, and then I'll just redo this end over there when I'm done. So conveniently, it's the same 17 millimeter and 19 millimeter that used on the other side. Actually, always a good idea if you're loosening parts that have been sitting for a while, especially exterior engine parts, a little bit of penetrating lubricant, so I don't mind if it's a little messy. I can clean that up later. We'll go ahead and loosen this. That's not bad at all. So this is just going to pop out. There's the O-ring that I'm going to need to replace. Now that that is out of the way, I can pop these out of their clips all along the radiator there. So all down here, I'm just going to very gently release this from the clips holding it in place. There we go. So now we got a lot of wiggle room here on the other end to remove it from the receiver dryer. That should allow us to free up the receiver dryer completely and get that out of the way. So let's see if we're successful in that. Yep. Get this pipe out of the way. It's an O-ring. Again, I'm going to have to replace, so I'm going to just set that to the side for right now so I can match it up with my O-ring set. And now I should be able to release the receiver dryer. Yes, here's the old busted one, and yeah, I can see where I've cross-threaded it inside there, that main aperture, so I messed up the threads. That was all on me. I'm going to have to be careful with the replacement. Now, I am one of those people that likes to save everything possible. So even though this receiver dryer is busted, I'm going to remove any parts that might come in handy as spares later. So this Schrader valve over here, these can develop leaks. This one's basically never been used because I screwed this whole thing up when I installed it. So I'm going to remove that, hang on to it. And this little Allen screw, set screw at the top, I can remove that because obviously I broke one before installing it. Good to have a spare just in case I mess one up down the line. There we go, got a nice Allen wrench in there. That just comes right out. There we go. Sometimes people ask me, well, you know, why do you save all these weird little bits? I'm a little bit of a pragmatist. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Now I started to clean up the threads on these a little bit. I got a little bit more cleaning left to do just to make sure that they're going to thread in nicely. But I discovered on this one there is some leftover thread from where I stripped out the old units. So I'm going to need to take a pick, clean that out of there, get that spare aluminum out, make sure that thread is nice and clean so it doesn't strip out our other one as we are getting into it. So I'm going to take care of that, and then we should be ready to put the new receiver dryer in. I'm just using one of these pick sets from Harbor Freight Tools, and I should be able to start back right in here in the thread and lift out. Let's see, where does it start? Right in here, and lift out the stripped thread. It's a little challenging because the sucker is wedged in there and don't want to poke myself to death, but this has got to go before we reinstall. Just take my time, lift out. Yep, there we go. We got some of it coming out of there. Make sure it doesn't fall into another thread elsewhere like it just did with that. That can go. Yeah, some nice little bits of broken stripped thread. We do not like that. You don't belong here. I cast thee out, demon. Alright. Now, of course, with using cheap picks, you do wear them down. So I am noticing that my picks are a little worn. The tips are bent in funky ways, which is requiring some interesting manipulation here. But I think get most of this extra junk out of here. Should be pretty good. One of the tricks too, if you find that you have something like this where the thread is a little bit messed up, but you have to use this part again, before you stick it into your new part, go get a nut and thread it on. Better yet, if you have a chase, a nut that's got some notches cut into it that you can run on here to run out any errors in the threads, make sure they're perfect. So I'm gonna go grab just such a thing and take care of this before we reinstall it. So, minor change of plan with the repair. As I did find a proper size bolt or nut that I could thread onto here to test, found that the threads on here really are off right from the get-go. It'll just start to go on and then immediately stop. Now this is the correct thread pitch. It should go on there, but it does not. And I do not have a tap and die set with this particular thread pitch and size. So what I do have is, conveniently, a spare of the entire line. So what I've done is I cleaned it up and made sure that it does actually thread in really nicely in here. So I'm just going to remove this old line and we'll resurrect it. I'm not going to throw it away because all these parts are no longer available from the dealership. They've been discontinued for many years. So we're just going to take it out. I'm going to recondition it at a later time so I continue to have a spare in the case that I have an oops on the front and I need to replace this stuff. But in the meantime, I am going to go ahead and install this with the other spare hose that I had and the new receiver dryer and the metal pipe, and we'll be up and running very shortly. So what I've decided to do also is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I threaded this in. This was the troublesome side that I had a hard time getting in because it's at a slight angle when it is mounted versus this one that's pretty much 90 degrees in from the side. So I've already pre-threaded it. It's not completely tight, but it is threaded all the way in where I know it's not going to cross thread. I'm going to go ahead and remove the safety plug on the other side here. And oh yeah, I need to place the O-ring on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and pop on a new O-ring. This probably use a little bit of lubrication, make sure that it's going to be happy when I'm threading it on. So I'm going to go ahead and lube that as well. Kung Fu Voodoo Monkey Death Grip, not necessary with any of this. Now I just need to put an O-ring back over here in this other connection, tighten that up, and we'll be good to start testing it. The vacuum manifold and the gauges, we'll test the sucker out. Alright, if you have never dealt with a vacuum gauge, this is a manifold pressure gauge for air conditioning. You can get them at like Harbor Freight Tools for pretty cheap, as well as this vacuum pump, which vacuums all the pressure out of the system and lets you do that. Now back here are your access ports for the air conditioning, and so they're not the easiest things to get to, but not too bad. And just get there into the Schrader valves, and these guys attach onto those Schrader valves so that you can check the system and fill the system, purge the system, all that fun stuff. So gonna get those plugged on there. Start by taking off the covers. I don't want to put them right on the carbon fiber. this guy. If you haven't done this sort of thing before, there are two different sizes for the high and the low. They will not go on the wrong side. If you're trying to plug this on and it's not staying, you're working with the wrong side. So blue is your cold side and red is your hot side, as you might figure. So we're gonna start with our low pressure. Feed that in there. Release connectors on the Schrader valve. Okay, that's on. Hot side one on as well. Those of you noticing the carbon fiber under my hood, this is all courtesy of Spoon-Fed Tuning. He does amazing work. He's one of the long-term great supporters of the Corrado enthusiast family. So thank you, James, for continuing to make good stuff. As a matter of fact, I just bought one of his 90mm front spoilers for the car. Pretty much anytime he makes something for a Corrado, I buy it, whether or not I actually need it, so that I'll have it later down the line. And plus, I want to support anyone that is actually making stuff for a Corrado. So those are on here. I'm not going to tighten down the top screws just yet. So once you get the quick release fittings installed on the bottom, get my camera loose here. These top screws, those will actually activate the valve that is in there, and I'm not going to activate the valve yet, so I'm leaving them completely loose, which means the valves are not engaged until I get the vacuum line connected over here to our vacuum pump. So this guy is going to go on here, and then we can get it all sorted out. There's oil in the pump. Yep, good there. I recommend you check your oil before you use your pump every time. It uses a bit, especially if you're running it for like 45 minutes at a time. All right, we're connected there. We are connected up top here. The valves are closed at the top. So you're not going to be able to hear me as soon as I start the pump because it's pretty loud. But what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the pump. We are then going to tighten these valves so that they are open to the system, and then we will release these valves and you'll see the vacuum actually start to actuate inside this. I'm not going to open both sides of it immediately. I may do it for a little bit just to get as much stuff out of the system. There's going to be some moisture. We're going to see it bleeding out of the pump, and then after a while I'll close the high side so that we only have vacuum pressure coming through the low, working its way back out, and then after 20 minutes or so we'll go ahead and shut the pump off, and then we're going to monitor this low pressure, make sure that it's down here, you know, not losing vacuum. So there we go. Let's get this rolling here. So turn on the pump. Oh, it's not too loud. I remember it being louder than that. All right, so again, we're not seeing anything here yet because I haven't opened these valves. I am going to seal these valves down here, which engages them with the system. So the Schrader valves are now engaged. Well, at least the cold side is. Engage the hot side here. All right, so both Schrader valves are now engaged. Now I'm going to open up cold side. Yep, you see that needle jump downwards into vacuum. I'm gonna go ahead and do the hot side too, just pull vacuum on both sides of the system for right now. And after a little while, we're gonna start to see some moisture coming out of here as it works vacuum into the system. So I'm just gonna let that go for about 20 minutes. Then we're gonna come back, turn off the pump, and check the vacuum levels. All right, it has been 20 minutes. We've been running the vacuum pump, and theoretically, any moisture in the system should be cleared out. So what we're gonna do now is we are gonna close the valves to the vacuum pump. And we are going to see if our system holds pressure. First of all, I'm gonna close the high side just to eliminate one potential point of failure. So I'm gonna back off the Schrader valve from the high side, just leave the low side connected. And we're gonna see here if it holds pressure after I turn off the vacuum. So, we'll do this. I'm gonna close this first to make sure that the system is sealed. And let's see, it's pointing all the way down to the U there in the US General. So that's kind of our point. Turning off the pressure, and we're gonna keep an eye on this over the next 40 minutes and see if it maintains vacuum. Now, a lot of times if there's a major leak, just in the first few seconds, it'll lose everything. We can also go around all the things that we just opened and listen for hissing noises, spray bubble water, soapy water on there to see if there's anything, but we'll just give it a check. I don't hear anything. I don't hear anything, and the needle's not moving rapidly, so we're just gonna leave it, come back in about 20 minutes and see how it's doing. All right, back to the Corrado. It has been 40 minutes, and look at the gauge, still in the same place, so we have no leak, which is great news for us. All right, we're gonna go ahead and remove the manifold from the system. We'll start putting all of this back together, and then we can get the system recharged. Now, there's a couple of ways to go about that. You can either take it to an AC spot where they have all of the EPA required things and parts that they need. Ooh, that was an extreme close-up. to refill your AC system with whatever the refrigerant is. Mine happens to be R134A, which is really common. I can literally go down to AutoZone and buy a can of it and fill it up, but it's not going to be the exact amount my system needs if I do that. I can do math and I can use a scale and I can figure it out, but that's really sketchy. And after all the work that I put into this, I feel better trusting a professional to get it up to spec than for me to do it myself. Now, the other thing that you can do is there is a product called EnviroSafe ES12, which is a replacement for both R12 and R134A. With this, if you do install the ES12, you do not want to have your system under a vacuum before you have it installed. You want to be working from relative ambient pressure. So you can vacuum out the system to check for leaks, but then before you add it, you're actually going to crack open the system and make sure that it's at ambient pressure, and then you add the ES12. It does have a desiccant in its mix that will make sure that any ambient moisture that gets in when you crack open the system like that is going to not be affecting the system in a negative way. So that's one way to do it. That stuff comes highly recommended. It can be mixed with R134A, but there's math involved. I don't feel like doing math, so I'm just going to have someone do this for me.